The room was quiet when Senator Cory Booker walked in, though no one expected what was about to happen because what Booker had in his hand that morning wasn't just a question, it was a document. And that document was about to change everything. Was a routine Senate confirmation hearing. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Just another day in Washington. Another nominee sitting at the witness table. Another round of senators asking questions that most people watching at home would forget by the time the evening news came on. Kash Patel sat at the witness table, confident, composed, prepared. He had been through rooms like this before. He understood the dynamics. He knew how the game was played. You take your seat. You answer the easy questions politely. You deflect the hard ones with careful, measured language. You stay calm. You stay consistent. And if you're disciplined enough, if you stick to your script, you walk out of that chamber with your narrative still intact. His team had prepared him extensively. They had rehearsed the difficult questions. They had anticipated the angles of attack. They had worked through every scenario they could think of. But Booker had done his homework in a different way. The file sitting in front of him wasn't something Patel's team had prepared. For the hearing started like any other. Procedural questions, statements for the record, the usual formalities that fill the first 20 minutes of any Senate proceeding and test the patience of everyone watching on C-SPAN. Patel answered everything smoothly. He was calm. He had his talking points locked in. His answers were tight, controlled, almost rehearsed in their precision, and for a while, it looked like this was going to go exactly the way his team had planned it. But then, Booker leaned forward, and the tone in the room shifted instantly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. Booker didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a speech. He didn't grandstand for the cameras pointed at his face. He simply picked up the document sitting in front of him and started reading the first line. Alone stopped the room cold because what Booker was reading wasn't from a newspaper. It wasn't from a blog post or a cable news segment. It wasn't a political attack memo assembled by opposition researchers with an axe to grind. It was an official record, a real document with real dates, real names, and real numbers that didn't belong to anyone's narrative. They just existed. The way facts exist, whether anyone wants them to or not, and what that record showed directly contradicted everything Kash Patel had just said under oath. Booker looked up from the paper slowly. He looked directly at Patel, and he asked one question. Just one. The silence that followed lasted nearly 7 seconds. 7 seconds doesn't sound like a long time when you're reading about it here. In everyday life, 7 seconds is nothing. It's the pause between songs. The moment before a traffic light turns green. But in a United States Senate hearing room, with cameras rolling, microphones live, and every senator in that chamber watching, 7 seconds feels like a lifetime. It stretches, it grows. It fills the space in a way that nothing else can. Patel opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. What came out wasn't an answer. It was a hedge, a deflection, a slow pivot towards something adjacent, something nearby, something that had just enough of a connection to the actual question that it could pass as a response to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. But everyone in that room was paying close attention, and Booker let him finish anyway. Waited, patient, quiet, deliberate. He gave Patel every inch of rope he needed. Then he picked up the document one more time. Let me read that again, he said. That's the moment the room truly went silent. Not the nervous, uncomfortable silence that fills a room when someone asks a question no one wants to answer. A different kind of silence. The kind that settles over a space when everyone present understands simultaneously that something significant is happening, because everyone in that chamber understood exactly what was playing out in front of them. This wasn't theater. This wasn't political posturing for the cameras or a performance designed to generate a clip for social media. This was a United States senator holding a piece of paper, an actual, verifiable official piece of paper, that told the story Kash Patel absolutely did not want told in a public hearing room with the entire country watching. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand the position at stake. Kash Patel was nominated to serve as the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, one of the most powerful and consequential law enforcement positions in the entire United States government. The FBI director oversees more than 35,000 employees. The director sets the institutional priorities. The director controls the direction of the nation's most powerful domestic intelligence and law enforcement agency. The decisions made at that level reach into every corner of American life in ways most people never see and rarely think about. It is not a position given out casually. The stakes are too high. The responsibility is too significant, which is precisely why the Senate confirmation process exists, to make sure that anyone holding that level of power has been subjected to rigorous public scrutiny before they ever walk through the door. And Cory Booker had taken that responsibility seriously. His staff had spent weeks preparing for this hearing. They went through filings. They pulled official records that most people never bother to access. They reviewed correspondence, logs, financial disclosures, and institutional timelines that, when laid out side by side in careful sequence, began to tell a very specific story and what they found wasn't buried or classified or hidden behind locked doors. It was just overlooked until Booker decided not to overlook it anymore. Here's what made the document so significant. The record Booker placed on the table contained a specific date, a specific name, and a specific figure, a number tied directly to a series of decisions and statements that Patel had previously described in very different terms on multiple public occasions. This wasn't a matter of interpretation. It wasn't a framing issue or a question of political perspective. It wasn't the kind of disagreement where both sides can point to the same facts and reasonably arrive at different conclusions. It was a factual discrepancy, a direct, documentable conflict between what the official record showed and what the nominee had just sworn to be true. When Booker read the number out loud, you could watch it land in real time. Senators on both sides of the aisle shifted in their seats. Staffers leaned toward each other. The low murmur that had been running quietly through the chamber simply stopped, because numbers don't have party affiliations. Documents don't lie to protect anyone. What that record showed created an undeniable conflict with the sworn testimony Kash Patel had just delivered minutes earlier at the same witness table. That's the part that carries the most weight. When a nominee appears before the Senate, they are not simply answering questions for the public record. They are speaking under oath. Every statement they make carries legal weight. Every word they choose is a formal declaration of fact before the legislative branch of the United States government. Perjury, lying to Congress under OATH, is a federal crime. It carries real consequences. The kind of consequences that don't disappear when the news cycle moves on. So, when a senator produces a document that directly contradicts what a nominee just swore was true, the significance of that moment extends far beyond politics. It goes beyond party affiliation and media narratives and the daily back and forth of Washington combat. It becomes a legal question. Booker gave Patel every opportunity to address it. He didn't ambush him. He didn't cut him off or refuse to let him speak. He asked the question, and he waited for a full, complete answer before returning to the document. He asked again, more directly this time, with the document open in front of him. Patel still didn't give a straight answer. Instead, he began questioning the context surrounding the document itself. He suggested that the numbers needed to be examined more carefully. He argued that there were nuances involved that a single record couldn't adequately capture. He insisted that the full picture was considerably more complicated than what any one page could convey. These are standard deflection techniques. Anyone who has watched more than a handful of Senate hearings has seen them deployed in exactly this way. They are practiced, they are polished, and in the right circumstances, against the right questioner, they can work. But Booker had anticipated every single one of them. He nodded slowly while Patel spoke. He let every word land. He gave no indication of where he was going next. Then, once Patel finished, Booker said something that made the entire room hold its breath. He said he had a second document, and that second document, he explained quietly, addressed every nuance Patel had just raised. The moment Booker set it on the table, Patel's posture changed. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable to anyone watching closely. His shoulders dropped slightly. The muscles along his jawline visibly tightened. The settled, controlled confidence that had been present in his body language since the hearing began started to drain out of it in real time, because he could see what Booker was holding, and he recognized what was in it. What followed over the next several minutes was one of the most striking exchanges in recent Senate hearing history. Booker didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform. He didn't deliver a speech designed to generate a 30-second clip. He simply read, line by line, methodically, without theater or flourish. And with every line he read, the gap between what Patel had said and what the documents actually showed grew wider, more specific, and significantly harder to explain away with vague references to context and nuance. By the time Booker finished reading the second document, the question in the room was no longer whether a contradiction existed. That question had already been answered. The new question, the one hanging in the air over every senator, every staffer, every journalist, and every camera operator in that room, was how anyone was going to explain it. Patel tried. His legal team was present. His political supporters were seated nearby, but the documents were also present, and documents have a way of cutting through political noise in ways that almost nothing else in Washington can. You can dismiss a political opponent as biased. You can dismiss a journalist as having an agenda. You can dismiss a critical editorial as partisan. You cannot dismiss an official government record sitting in plain sight on the table in front of a Senate committee with every major network camera in Washington pointed directly at it. What Booker did in that hearing room was deceptively simple. He didn't perform. He didn't make it about himself. He didn't turn his allotted time into a lecture or a campaign speech. He brought documents, he read them out loud, and he asked the questions that the documents demanded be asked. That's it. That was the entire strategy. And it worked not because it was clever, but because it was honest. Because it relied not on rhetoric or reputation or political positioning, but on the one thing that is genuinely difficult to argue with when it's sitting right in front of you, the facts, exactly as they were recorded. years from now. When people look back at this confirmation process, they won't remember the opening statements. They won't remember the procedural votes, or the party line posturing, or the applause lines delivered for the home audience. They'll remember the 7 seconds of silence. They'll remember the moment a senator placed a document on a table, read a number out loud into the official congressional record, and the nominee for the most powerful law enforcement position in the United States had absolutely nothing to say. Silence was not empty. It was full of something that no prepared answer and no rehearsed deflection could displace. Not guilt, necessarily. Not innocence either. The truth of what that silence ultimately means will require more time, more information, and more scrutiny to fully understand. But what it contained, without question, was this: the recognition, visible and public and permanent, that the story Kash Patel had walked into that hearing room with was no longer the only story in the room. There was another story now, one written not by a journalist, not by a political enemy, not by anyone with a personal stake in the outcome, written by the documents themselves. And when the documents tell a different story than the testimony, one of them has to be wrong. That's not a political statement, that's just logic. Senator Booker didn't resolve that contradiction in the hearing room. He didn't deliver a verdict. He didn't declare a winner or pretend to know exactly what the full truth looked like. What he did was simpler than that. And more important, he made sure the contradiction couldn't be quietly buried. Senators are actually supposed to do when someone sits before them under oath and asks for the public's trust. He read the documents. He asked the questions, and when the answers didn't match what the record showed, he kept reading. Because when you read the documents, the truth has nowhere left to hide. What do you think about this moment? Was this a real contradiction, or was there more context behind the documents Senator Booker presented? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more breakdowns of intense congressional hearings and the moments that changed the conversation in Washington, make sure to subscribe to Capitol Clash and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.